Wow, that was that was good. A lot to unpack there. Um, I'd like to introduce Sean Goode, the executive director of Choose 180. How are you doing, Sean?
That was a little overwhelming. Um, yeah, that was a lot. There's so much there to unpack, and I wish we had a really long time to be able to unpack that with each other. But I'm grateful for the space that we will be able to share over the next bit of time.
Yeah. Well, it looks like we have one of our panelists who has joined us. We're waiting for a couple of them to um, meet us. But yeah, it looks like we already have a question too.
Stefana, looks like Judge Keenan doesn't have the panelist link. So if you could email him quickly,
Yeah.
that would be great.
Okay.
Darrell, can you come off camera or come on camera and come off mute? There we go. Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Darrell Green in the place to be with that wonderful Choose 180 hat. Good to see you this evening, brother. Thanks for sharing space with me and Stefana. Judge Dave Keenan's going to be joining us shortly, and so will Brother Craig, who starred in the play as one of the jurors to participate. Darrell, while we're waiting for them to tap in, like, what's first impressions for you, man? First of all, have you seen 12 Angry Men before?
No, I did look up and see what it was and what it was about. And that it was, it came out a long time ago, but I wanted to just not have any previous bias or anything. So I wanted to just enjoy it for the first time. And I was impressed.
Right. Yeah. I mean, seeing it with the all black jury, the dynamics were pretty breathtaking, to say the least. Craig, so it looks like Craig Jackson's on too. Stefana, Craig may not have the link to Craig might not have the link to the panelist either, so we can make sure he gets that. Thank you so much. I appreciate y'all hanging tight with us so we work through a couple of these technical difficulties as we make that happen. Darrell, I'm gonna ask you a question, bro, while we're waiting. The original was written, like you said, like a small bit of forever ago. And yet, like, it still feels incredibly current. What were some of the things that you heard in the film that really resonated with you and today that, like, still were at play?
Man, multiple things. Number one, sometimes your public defense lawyers are terrible. and they really don't do a good job of fighting, for some of our people that don't have the funds to afford somebody to, get justice, give more incentive to get justice. And then either way you look at it, that jury was not diverse. And there were people on it that had very problematic biases going in there, so they shouldn't have been on the jury in the first place.
Mm-hmm,
and I think the other thing that really stood out to me that unfortunately is still very current is that it took a community member or someone that was the person's peer to advocate for the individual in order for, the justice system to work. And, those three main things really stuck with me the most as I was looking at it.
Yeah. I think there you go. Welcome, Judge Dave Keenan. Thank you so much for tapping in and joining us. By the way, is that a sports coat with the white T-shirt underneath? Man, you look
it's the Miami Vice look.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna throw you the same question I just threw Darrell, and
sure.
That is, that this was filmed a long time ago. It was written a long time ago, and in this reproduction, there was lots of familiarities. What were some of the things that jumped out to you?
Well, I mean, what's interesting to me, Sean, one of the things that's interesting to me is it resonates with me a lot as a judge, and it's fascinating to me because I don't know what goes on in the jury room. In my career so far, I've had 37 jury trials. I have no idea what anybody talks about.
Yeah.
But I wonder sometimes, is it like that? And I've had cases like this involving young Black men, for example, and wonder, how do people grapple with these issues, or do they grapple with them at all? And I've had juries come back very quickly, which sometimes worries me, and I've had juries take a long time, and that sometimes worries me as well. But I'm always wondering what's going on back there. And, you know, we encourage jurors, we tell them that you should fully and fairly consider the evidence before you vote. So in other words, we really don't want you to sit down and take a vote the moment you get back there in the jury room, but we don't know.
Yeah, and I think one of the, beyond like the jury, just what was happening in the jury room. I mean, when this was originally cast, it was all 12 white jurors, and I think like the complexities of race to pull from this, right, and that dynamic, and some of what goes into play in our community, and I say our, I mean Black community, around class, really profoundly jumped out, particularly when the brother was going in about, how those kids are. And I don't, and in our work, there's been so many times where I've explained to people that grace is a far better motivator for behavior change than guilt, and that we have to see young people as possibilities and not problems. And still, people that look just like those young people that we're supporting and serving will animately say, no, they did the crime, they need to do the time. And it's amazing that after all these years, we still have the same type of system. In fact, Judge, I'll throw this one to you, and then Gerard, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Like, we're talking about like what, 50, 60 years since this was originally written. How much has changed in the justice system?
No, not very much has changed at all, Stefan. I mean, Sean, I'm sorry. I apologize. I was thinking of Stefana, and I was thinking of missing our brother, Stephen Thomas. But what I was going to say is it would be far more accurate for that today to be an all-white jury. And I'll give you an example. I spent the first 2 years as a judge at the Maline Regional Justice Center, which serves South King County, everything south of Interstate 90. So if this crime took place south of I-90, it gets tried at the Maline Regional Justice Center. And even though we know that demographically, many of the Black community that used to be in central Seattle have been pushed south to Kent, Federal Way, Auburn, Renton, places like that, you consistently see veneers, and a veneer just means the group that we get to pick from, that are overwhelmingly right. And typically I'll get a group of 50 jurors in my courtroom to pick a jury of 12. And out of that 50, I will always scan the room because I'm thinking about the makeup of the jury. And quite often in Kent, there would be one or two, and sometimes no black prospective jurors at all. So at least in that respect, not much has changed. And we could go into the details about what feeds into the system to give us such a lack of diversity in the pool. But I would just say that right now it'd be very accurate for that to be a white jury, even in Kent.
Ro, what are some of your thoughts?
As far as, do I think things have changed with the justice system?
Yeah, the tone of your voice alludes to an answer, but I'll go ahead and let you answer for yourself, brother.
I think that it's adapted and evolved, but its function, especially when it is regarding low income people and people of color, its function still works exactly the same. But there have been like loopholes and different things that have been put in there, to give the appearance of progression at times. I think sometimes those things can be well-intentioned, and other times they're not well-intentioned. It's just to, get some heat off of them, and make it look better. But yeah, I think it's adapted, but the function of it is still the same. And when we look at our disparity statistics and look around our communities, you see that it's actually still functioning at the same level.
Yeah. And there have been remixes, right, and revamps to the way that things are done in effort to create less disparities, and yet the disparities continue to prevail. Less young people get engaged in the criminal legal system because of some of the practices that have been instituted by organizations like ours and collective justice, creative justice, community passageways, and others. Yet and still the disparities are the same as you're pulling to the forefront, Darrell, and which brings me to the next question. It's not one of the questions that were sent ahead, so it is what it is.
I didn't get any
But
questions in advance anyway, so.
well, I'm glad then, Dave. So you'll be ready. With that being said, do you think reform is actually possible?
So I'm sorry, Sean, the question was, do you think reform?
Yeah, do you think reform is possible? I mean, if we've gone, 60 years and we're having a similar conversation, is reform a possibility?
I think reform is a possibility, but this is the debate we've seen a lot this year when we talk about defunding, for example, because reform to me strikes me as a term that you would use for tinkering around the edges, like we're gonna try and make some changes from within the system, and I don't know if reform, at least as most people conceive of it, is possible. I really think that a lot of the system needs to be simply eliminated, and then something else has to be built in its place to address the problem that the prior system was addressing. So I think reform to me just sounds too incremental, and we've tried that. And it's and I want to be clear. So I'm a judge, right? So I'm part of the system. So I'm constantly tinkering, and my colleagues are tinkering as well. And some of us tinker with a lot more things, or a lot more willing to tinker with things. And other folks will say, well, maybe this still works, and that's a challenge, to be in the system, but to say that perhaps we need to abolish this system.
Darrell, I don't want to keep throwing you softballs, but what are your thoughts?
Well, and how you doing this evening, Judge? Good to see you again.
Good to see you, Darrell.
I remember why you was one of my favorite judges now, listening to you talk, because I'm inclined to pick up where you left off and maybe even take it a step further. But I think the point, reform does sound like, a code word in some ways for keep things mostly how they are, but make it cool enough that we shut people up. And that's kind of like the same thing I was alluding to in the last answer. Like there's a good portion of things that just outright need to be abolished from the beginning. Our thought process, how we look at what justice is, needs to change from the beginning. And I think really the point of the so-called system, other than the punitive things it does, is it's supposed to be reforming people. And so I think if we make it a people issue, and think of how we can, reform the communities and fix the families, and restore those things. And I think if we start taking those things into consideration, I think if we start taking things, I don't know what it takes to be a judge, right? All the qualifications, but I definitely think that people's moral character and things like that should be taken into consideration. Otherwise, how can we trust you to judge? Those things sound like real simple and like common sense type things, but that's not actually how you get to be a judge. It's by being a person of outstanding moral character and just impartiality. You might happen to be that type of a person, but you don't have to be. And there's not really a way of like kind of checking and balancing that. So yeah, do I think reform is possible? Because I'm wearing my Choose 180 hat today, I have to say yes. But there's a cynic in me that's like, I don't know.
And Darrell, I'll give you the peace of mind to say that I also don't know. And as executive director of Choose 180, your hat doesn't have to dictate your stance. In that regard, and I'll tell you why I don't know is because I think about restorative community pathways, and some of the folks that are on here know about it because we've been sharing updates, and some of you don't, but the King County just approved $6.2 million to go into this alternative that we've co-created with collective justice, creative justice, and community passageways. It's going to create the space initially for about 500 young people to exit out of the criminal legal system and get referred directly to community, and ultimately 600 to 800 young people. And that is a big sweeping change, but I wouldn't say that qualifies for reform. I think that almost leans closer to abolition, because in essence, we're abolishing the need for the court to be engaged in those particular practices. And I think that's where we need to begin to lean into myself, is how do we make sure that these systems are less relevant, and we abolish the need for their existence, and do so by building up those community supports, reforming neighborhoods like you were alluding to, Darrell. That way young people are living in spaces and everybody has equal access to wealth and opportunity, and wage gaps aren't as prevalent as what they are, and et cetera, the health disparities, right? We can go down the really long list that contributes to young people living in a space where they feel insecure, and as a result, crimes are committed, or things that are determined to be crimes are committed. Dave, there was a question that dropped into the chat, and I encourage folks, please drop questions in the Q&A box or into the chat. I'm checking both of them out while we're having this time together. And the question that popped into the chat was, as a judge, what do you think could be done to enforce the change in the justice system among having balanced juries, et cetera?
That's a great question. And there's been some good work in Washington on jury reform. Not to use the word reform again, I guess. But there are some things that can change. So just very quickly, the juror rolls come from a combination of voter registration records, Washington state license records, and identicards, so state ID records, and that's it. And so, I mean, much like the justice system, I don't like to use the term justice system, I prefer to call it the criminal legal system. Much more like the criminal legal system, we have to change the inputs. So we could broaden the jury pool if we changed the inputs. And I think there are a number of things that you could do. For one thing, we could have automatic voter registration, right? Which would mean that more people would be registered to vote. So automatically there'd be more people. And I think we could broaden the database so that it's not just driver's licenses and state identicards. We could draw from people who have applied for means tested public benefits, for example, college students, any number of things where somebody submits a record to change the inputs. We could make it easier for people to serve, to be away from their work. Right now, the maximum jury pay in Washington is $25 a day. But King County pays $10 a day, which is not nearly enough. We could provide childcare, and I can't tell you how many times I'll bring in prospective jurors and they'll say, "Judge, I'd love to help you." So give me an example. I just finished a 5-week jury trial in person at Maidenbauer Civil Jury Trial. How many people do you know could take 5 weeks unpaid leave off of work at $10 a day, right? So I could go on, but those are some of the things. But then I'll just tell you very quickly, on Friday, King County Superior Court suspended all in-person jury trials because of coronavirus. We had started doing civil jury trials at Maidenbauer Center in the large space there, and I had done 4. I'm starting a civil jury trial this week, which will be entirely over Zoom. The jurors will be at home. That won't work typically in a criminal case for a number of constitutional reasons, unless the parties agree. But one thing that we could do that might make it more inclusive is have, for example, remote jury trials where people are able to be in a space that works better for them.
Yeah. And, a lot of stuff in the chat box right now affirming that $10 a day, not even an hour, and you're forced to do jury duty. There was a comment from a middle school English teacher, Sarah. She said that in 7th grade English, we study the screenplay. The students are riveted by it and are so quick to point out how relevant these themes are. They're also shocked to learn how much jurors are paid or how little, and how that skews jury pools. Yeah, I mean, like that is a certain level of privilege that you have to be able to even be on a jury.
Totally.
And I think it was gosh, over 90% of the cases that went before a judge in King County for adults last year qualified for public defenders.
That's right.
And so how are you going to have a jury of your peers if your peers are those that are in a similar economic disparity and they can't afford to actually be on the jury, right? So inequity seems embedded in it all. I wanna call out something that Gordon McHenry, I'm gonna shout Gordon out, who's the CEO of United Way of King County. He said that the example I provided about the restorative community pathways spoke to abolition plus resources. So shout out to the guy that has a lot of resources through United Way, shouting out that there's a need for both resources. And in that, I think the power of it is the divestment from the systems of inequity and the investment in community alternatives, where, you know, people need to begin to have jobs go away in order for there no longer to be a need to have young people before them in those jobs. And so, yeah, great call out, Gordon, that there needs to be a combination of both abolition and resourcing the alternative. We can't just say we're not going to do that anymore, but we need to be able to pay for the thing that we can do, and that there are things that we absolutely can do. Now, both Judge and Darrell, you can answer this question on a personal level and keeping with your own experiences in mind. What part of this film had the greatest impact on you, or this play had the greatest impact on you? Darrell?
You know, I went a lot of different places when I was watching it. I thought about some of the times when I personally like took plea deals and didn't go to jury trial for cases that I had, and, you know, wondering if you're making a mistake, you know, or not. But I think the thing that resonated to me the most just was like being a Black man, right? And I understand that they had to play these roles, you know, to, you know, portray, you know, what the things that could be happening in this jury room. But I do remember before I was doing this work in the community, how older Black males and women looked at me, and I knew that they thought like, basically I just was a person that I value life less than them. I don't care about certain stuff. I'll just automatically lie. And I remember like the anger that I had, you know, towards individuals like that. But now that I'm old enough to have processed, I know that I was hurt, you know, by people, especially people I consider to be my own, you know, actually viewing me in that way. And it's like, man, like, even if I could have got like, you know, some Black folks on my jury, would it even have mattered? Or would they have had the same racist view of me as, you know, somebody else would have, you know, that wasn't Black? And that just had me like really sitting here like, that's the thing, just me as a person, when I talk about reforming our communities and things we could do. I wish I could really get rid of us looking at each other like that,
Yeah.
and then getting mad when other people do it, you know, and acting like we don't have that problem we need to fix within.
Yeah. I want to, Darrell, thank you for that. I want to pause real quick before we go to you, Judge, to introduce our celebrity panelist, Craig Jackson. Craig, man, thanks for tapping in and joining us. Wonderful job in the play, brother. And it's so good to see your face, man.
Yeah, thank you, man. Can you see me?
I can see you and I can hear you. So we're 2 for 2.
Good.
Craig, I'm going to ask you this question. Just, you know, you came in, so I'm going to come in hot with you, man. You acted in this, right? In fact, I'm going to pivot a little bit away because, and I'm going to ask you something and you can answer however you want to answer it, okay? Because I know a little bit about your journey and a little bit about your story, right? How open-ended, right? How was being in this play as a juror impacted the way that you viewed some of the things that have happened over the course of your life over these past couple of years?
I'm gonna kind of cheat because I heard Darrell. Yeah, I've been in the criminal justice system before myself as a Black man. Coming up, I mean, just stops for the wrong reason. Tail light out and pulled over and questioned and sat down. I've gone to court, and I wish I would have had a jury of my peers, for real. I didn't see anybody if I had a jury. I also heard Darrell, I was trying to get on, I heard him talk about, sometimes you see, and I know there's not a recipe for a public defender, and most lawyers start as public defenders. But I remember being told to just take this plea and move on, not go to trial. So the system, I know, wasn't set up for me to be successful in that system. First thing first, I got to try to keep myself out of the system, but the other system puts me into the judicial system. But when I was asked to do it, it was kind of like, because of now the way that I am, getting older, wiser, learning from my mistakes, don't want other folks to make the mistakes that I made. So it was kind of like a calling. My character, for sure, he wasn't even worried about the trial. He was just ready to get up out of there and go to the game or whatever it was. So he did a disservice to that young man who looks just like him, that young man who probably looked up to him. And when he walked in the room and saw those folks in there, said, whoa, I got a chance, I got action. But I didn't even give him action because I was just worried about me. And that may be because of what happened to me when I was young. Let him go through it too. I had to go through it. I'm trying to get to this game. But I don't know, it still resonates really hard, Sean, that, we got our youngsters going through this, and still some of our older guys are going through this every day. And I just and I was hoping that we had a lot of people watching it, because it showed that there were 12 men who could come in with different ideas from different walks of life. Even though we all looked alike, we were all from different walks of life. We had a man in there that probably never went to jail. He was well-dressed, well-mannered, spoke well. You had, the other juror who was kind of like, yeah, I'm Black, but I don't like Black people because I know how they are.
Mm-hmm.
And then you had, your peacemaker, and then juror number 8 was really what I believe everybody should try to be like. It's hard, but you have to try to really sit down and listen. You have to sit down and weigh the facts. You have to sit down and let the process take its course, but you have to stay that fight. And he stayed that fight and eventually turned everyone. So it was amazing. It was challenging to be a person of color and understand that now you're playing the role of someone who doesn't care or thinks the system is working the right way for those type of people, or as juror 8. No, it doesn't matter who you are. I need to see what was right, and let's talk about it for a minute.
Yeah, and for all of my my non-Black friends that are tapped in tonight, I think the jury was a wonderful example of, like, Black folks are not a monolith, right? Like, there's a diversity of perspectives and opinions, and, like, so there's not a, like, what is it that Black people want, right? Isn't simple and succinct, right? And so that's part of the complexity of this whole thing, right? I went to Pioneer, or I went to Pike Place yesterday, and there was a gentleman on the corner shouting out. So I walked out of Pike Place. I don't see who's shouting what. I hear somebody saying Black Lives Matter, and then I hear somebody yelling All Lives Matter. I get down there, it's a white dude yelling Black Lives Matter, and a Black dude yelling All Lives Matter, and I was like, what world am I in right? Oh, I'm in Seattle. That's right. That's the world I'm in. But still, like, that exists and that's real, and that there was such a need for that in the play, for that juror to be able to speak in that way, so folks could really be able to capture that. Judge, I'm gonna go to you with that question on a personal level, and with your experience in mind, what part had the greatest impact on you?
I think probably more than anything, I was really keen in on the story of the defendant. You'd get little snippets of his life, like you heard about him losing his mother, right? I think when he was 9. And I thought to myself, the little snippets of the story that we were hearing about the defendant is the story of so many people that I see in my court. And every Friday afternoon, I have a sentencing calendar from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. where I am mostly sentencing Black and brown men to prison. And one of my most serious trials that I've had so far was a first-degree assault. It was a gang shooting. The defendant was Black and was looking at 30 years. And when I was sentencing him, I remember hearing the story of his life. about suffering from abuse and going through foster care and then getting involved in the juvenile justice system and then graduating to the adult criminal legal system. And that was the story it sounded like in many ways of the young man who was the defendant in the play. And what I think about is, and what I thought about then and what I think about now, and this ties into 180 and all the programs, Sean, that you talked about a few minutes ago, is I look at, when I sentence somebody, there's a score that's computed to give me the sentencing range. I think people think that judges have a lot of discretion in the sentences they impose. We really don't. We get a range. And you can look at that score sheet and you start at the top, it has the adult felonies, and you work your way down and you can see the juvenile criminal legal system involvement. And I think to myself, what would have made a difference 20 lines down, working backwards from today? This man was, I think, 31, working back to when he was 12 or 13. What would have made a difference to get him off of that track? And I think it's programs like Choose 180.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I regularly tell people that the first test I scored a perfect 10 on was the ACEs test. And for, that's that adverse childhood experiences for those that don't know. And so many of us that get caught up in the system score equally as high, because there's a variety of barriers that manifest themselves before you even end up sitting before Judge Keenan. And Judge, a question that popped over here was, do you feel that programs like community passageways can really help change these young African-American men that are in the system for serious crimes? Or do you feel like it's an easy way out? I know what your answer to this question is, right? But like, what I'd ask you is to answer it for yourself, to honor the question as it was posed. But then also, when you think about your peers that are serving in a similar capacity, what do you feel their thoughts are?
Yeah, I do think it can help, and I think, Sean, as you said, it was not surprising that I would answer that I do think that this works, because it's what I think of as community-led justice, and it's true justice. And I've been saying this for years before I was a judge, and I still say it, which is that there's no such thing as a justice system, at least the system. I don't work in a justice system, because there's no system in downtown Seattle and it can't cranking out justice. My dad's been incarcerated, and when he was sent to jail, nobody would ever say, "Oh, your dad's down there in the system getting some justice," right? In the justice system. But justice does sometimes come from our system, but it comes from the people in the system, right? It comes from the actors in the system, lawyers and staff members, and sometimes judges as well. I think a lot of us are trying to get there, but I think, when I conceive of what looks like justice to me, it looks more like organizations like Community Passageways, who are working in the community, peer-to-peer, for example. As far as what some of my colleagues think, there, at least in King County, there are 53 independently elected King County Superior Court judges, and I love all of my colleagues. We come at these issues in different ways, and I applaud many of my colleagues who have been in the court for a long time. I've been a judge for 4 years. We have judges that have been judges for 20 or 30 years who are willing to look at things anew. And at the same time, I have to be willing to come in and say, let me listen a little bit and not just say we got to throw everything out. Let me figure out first what I think is broken and then apply my lens to it.
Question that popped in the box as well. I'm going to ask this for you first, Craig. So earlier on, I know you were able to hear, but weren't able to tap in. Question from my friend at Highline School District. If reform is not a viable option, what does transformation look like?
Whoa. Wow. I think I'm so invested right now. So I got so many answers, no doubt. I just got a position with WIPCA, which is Washington Interscholastic Basketball Coaches Association. I'm the director of diversity. So the first thing I told WIPCA, who for years since Ed Pebble created it, it's been predominantly white ran and white members. But you look at the climate and the color of the basketball players in the state of Washington, besides being on the east side of the state, on the west side, it's pretty much almost all Black kids. And I told them that relationships are incredible. and they're very important. I don't think that they're paramount. I think connectivity is paramount. So you must, if you have a Black kid on your team, you must hire a coach that can connect with him, because we know there's things going on at home. There's reasons why some of the kids, I work in a high school, some of the kids come to school just to eat, no doubt. They come to eat, they come to be with kids that they know and have a better time than they have at home. And I went to school in the 80s. I tried to get out of school as soon as school was over. These kids stay till 6:30, 7 o'clock some nights because they don't want to go home because things are so bad. So you have to have someone that can connect with them to be able to try to push them in the right direction. And not by force, by respect. I work in a high school. So my first thing when I meet a kid in his 9th grade year is I show him respect so I get the respect back. Because there's going to be a time when I need to check you in a good way, keep you out of trouble. I'm going to need to say something to you, Black man to young Black man, that you have to hear from me the way that it's coming from me. And if I don't give you that respect right off the bat, you're not going to respect me when I come at you that way. I just think for our system and for our world, that right now, the time that we're in, our youngsters have the ability to change this world, no doubt. But it's not a moment, you know. Don't live in the moment of the injustices that we just seen. These injustices have been going on for years upon years upon years. In June of next month, next year, they're going to celebrate 100 years of Black Wall Street. That was an injustice, and I didn't even know about Black Wall Street till I went to college in the middle 80s. So I say that to say that we got to take our kids, teach them who they are and where they should, not where they should go, but what they're capable of, and let them see that every day. And that comes from us at home. That comes from us at home. And the old saying is true. A village, it takes a village.
Yeah, yeah. Craig, I want to call out the fact that you just barely made it in high school in the 80s. Because, you know, if you're in college in the mid 80s, then you were wearing those extra high shorts when you were playing basketball too. Yes.
Yeah.
Who's that?
And now they want to wear them now, Sean.
Oh man, I know, right? Anyhow, Darrell, man, same question. If reform is impossible, then what does transformation look like?
First things first, address the amendment with slavery that, you know, turned into mass incarceration, you know, why slavery is legal. I think if we're allegedly a country that, you know, freedom is in our DNA and stuff like that, then we should unwrite slavery, legalize out of it. And until we have the guts to actually look in the mirror and, you know, do that and take that out, then I don't take nationally the country serious when they're talking about addressing that. So that's first things first, is get that out of there. And then after that, you know, a thing that's less tangible. I hate to not say things that are tangible, but if you're talking about transformation, we're talking about changing multiple cultures, because as the judge said earlier, the system is not meant to give you justice, but some of the actors in the system might give you justice. And if the culture was where it was unacceptable for these subcultures within these different systems that we have, like whether it's school culture, whether it's police culture, whether it's Black culture, whatever culture it is, transformation would start with changing all those cultures within there and really making them understand that community involves all of us. And if you could get all of that on the same page as to you know, how we solve these social issues, then I think you can get transformation. So I gave one tangible and then one that's like probably wishful thinking, but I think that's what transformation looks like.
Judge, a question came through the chat. How do new or established judges learn about and how to utilize programs like Choose 180? Do they deepen do they depend on their colleagues' word of mouth, or are there more established communications pathways to ensure that they properly understand and can advocate for these programs?
It's a combination of things, Sean. And I mean, you already know that certainly the judges at the juvenile court in King County are very aware of Choose 80, because Choose 180 is in the courthouse, or at least would have been before the pandemic periodically. But otherwise, we have a number of committees in our court, at least in King County, that we have Courts and Community, for example, and there's a Superior Court Judges Association, which is a statewide association of all 193 judges that has a community group and a race equity group and a criminal law committee and a legislative committee. And so when we have conferences throughout the year where programs like this are talked about, where we have individuals that come in and speak, and then right now during the pandemic, we continue to have webinars and meet online and talk about these things. So really do think there's widespread awareness. Now, some judges may just differ in whether or not these programs are effective, or they may feel that other approaches are more effective, but I don't think awareness is an issue. Sometimes, and this goes in every system, not just the judiciary, but all three branches of government, the legislative and the executive. It's not a matter of awareness, it's a matter of, is there the will? Because I think all the things we're talking about in terms of transformation are absolutely doable. We could build what I think of as a justice system on the front end, where we're investing in mentoring for young people. There are programs that do this, where we're investing in pre-filing diversion programs that like the one that started Choose 180 to divert people away from the legal system before they get into it. We can invest in more alternatives to incarceration. We can invest in education while you're incarcerated, and we can invest in reentry programs if you end up being incarcerated. And if we did that, we'd have so much more filtering. We would change the inputs. Like, as a judge, one of my chief frustrations is I don't make the laws, the legislature does, right? They criminalize drug possession, for example, right? I don't charge people with crime. I don't arrest people, the police do, right? I don't charge people with crime, the prosecutors do. And I don't mean to say it as a cop-out, but by the time somebody gets to me at 1 p.m. on a Friday afternoon to be sentenced, the only question for me is, I'm going to sentence them to this many months or this many months, right? And I don't have any other alternatives. And so as a judge, I'm very much invested to the extent that I can, and I'm somewhat limited ethically in changing the inputs. And this is absolutely doable.
Thank you, Judge. I want to let everybody know, I see the questions coming in through the chat and through the Q&A box. Some of the questions are really specific to Dave Keenan, Judge Keenan. So I want to mix it around a little bit, because I don't want to actually hear from the old white guy the whole time. I want to hear from both Darrell and Craig too. Darrell, Craig, what does real justice look like to the two of you? Craig, it looks like Darrell's put it on pause waiting for you.
It's hard to say. It's hard to say what it looks like to me. I know what I would love it to be or look like. Like I said, I'm invested in a lot of things right now. We talk about the happenings of 1921. We have 1921 in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where it was getting ready to be a vibrant, self-sustaining township in the state of Oklahoma, where Black folks all stayed together, had their own hospitals, their own businesses, their money stayed there. Folks from other places came there because they felt proud that it was part of them. And I just got off the phone with some of those folks this weekend, and there's not one insurance claim that has been paid from 1921 to any of the families, any of the businesses that were there at that time. They're working for that. And I would say in a short, just a short term, that if they get those families paid back for insurance, and they're never going to get those lives back, but if they could do that, that's a move in the direction of some type of justice. It's hard for me. Like I said, I think the only thing that I can do at my age is try to understand it and try to make our youngsters understand what it is that they should be striving to do in the future. It's hundreds and hundreds of years of injustice, and it's not going to be changed overnight. But if we can get our kids to see that, you know, for real, the old moniker that they are the future for real, and start taking ownership, start taking pride in who they are, knowing who they are, and moving forward, that other things will be better. Judge and Darrell, they both said, you know, you gotta start within. So, you know, we have with the school district, we have equity meetings, we have racial bias meetings, and I'll have white teachers come ask me, how can I help? You can't. We have to get ourselves together first. You have to get yourselves together first. When we finally get together, let's get together and let's stop talking about stuff and let's start making things happen.
Thanks, Craig. When you said the children of the future, I immediately heard Whitney's voice in my head, and I wanted to start singing. It took everything inside me not to try to hit that note. Darrell, what are your thoughts?
You know, I don't know the Webster definition of justice right off the top of my head, but I feel it means like just doing the right thing and making things right and being willing to work towards that. And so I think the situation that Brother Craig just brought up, justice for the individuals he was talking about would be some, you know, give them their monetary due. And I think that goes into even some of the programs that we're writing now at Choose 180, where it's about, you know, restoring the victim or restoring the harmed party. That's definitely an aspect of justice. And you know, I think the other side of that, you know, people that criticize individuals like myself or maybe you that believe that maybe someone that harmed another party and created a victim, we need to hurt them at least as much as they hurt the victim, and then we can try to restore the hurt that we do to them afterwards. And so I don't have the exact answer for like how you do that, but intending to hurt people on purpose and then still at the same time have to have the responsibility to fix the hurt that you put on them afterwards, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't sound right. So I don't equate that with justice. We have to find a way to make sure that everyone is whole in our communities. And I think that will limit the amount of these times that we have to even have these tough conversations where it's like, wow, why did you shoot this person? You know, like, I think we would have less of that happening if we had a focus on having everyone be whole from the beginning. I think that's justice, is not having to make as many of these tough punitive decisions. Sometimes that means money, and sometimes that means something else. I don't know that there's a blanket term for justice. We got a case by case basis sometimes.
Yeah, I agree, and I regularly say that, you know, we get justice and judgment confused with each other, and that what people often mean is they want judgment, they don't want justice. They want something that has finality and end to it so they can move on. And justice has no destination. You are always going to be in a pursuit of becoming more just, because there is no perfectly straight line that can possibly be drawn. So we're constantly in pursuit of justice. And there's moments, indicators along the way that we feel that we're becoming more just, but we at a certain point have to abandon our pursuit of judgment, because anytime we're in pursuit of judgment, we're going to get it wrong. And we're going to cause harm, intended or unintended, either side of that coin. I got to ask one last question and wrap. I do want to call out our friend Rob from Safe Streets in Tacoma. Asked a question about how do we get equitable plan and support from courts for youth that fall between the cracks of the system. For example, youth that are not court involved but on the verge of being and do not have the supports needed to succeed and possibly avoid the system. Rob, I just want to shout out that opportunity in particular is one that I think is an absolute gap. So often we wait to resource young people when they have when they make a poor choice and they end up getting caught up because their behavior is being criminalized, and then we want to pour resources into them. But but we need to be more preemptive and get up on the front end. And in that, we really need to lean on folks that are funders in philanthropy to begin to divest from some of the things that they typically fund and invest in these types of alternatives and really put the money where the mouth is when people say they want Black lives to matter, so Black lives have to lead. And the other thing is we have to continue to pressure our county councils in Pierce County in your regard, and King County in ours, to divest from the court system and invest in community-based alternatives. We don't have a shortage of dollars. We have a poor allocation strategy, and we're way too often allocating in archaic systems that do punitive harm instead of progressive alternatives that see young people as possibilities and not problems. The last question that I'll ask is, in this time that we're in today, with a wave of social awareness as well as division in our nation, what gives you hope? And how can people show up for change right now? We'll let Dave go first, then we'll go Craig, and then I'll end with the wise and often prophetic Darrell Green. So Darrell, I just let in with all that. So whatever you say better be dope.
What gives me hope really is everybody here on this panel, everybody that's watching today, and Choose 180. And that little act of love I just saw there with Sean, and I think that was your son, was it not? Yes. What gives me hope is earlier this year when George Floyd died, and as a judge, I don't use the term murdered. I'm not allowed to say what I think about the circumstances of George Floyd's death, but it's undisputed that he died. And when he died, I thought to myself a lot of things, but one of the things I thought is that all of the discussion about, you can call it divestment, you can call it defunding, reallocation, upstreaming, all I thought is programs like Choose 180 are built for this moment of moving that infrastructure upstream to build a justice system, if that's what we want to call it, in the community. And that's what gives me hope, is that this is doable. And the conversation I often have with my colleagues, and we're all trying to get there in different ways, is can we imagine that system? And sometimes I'll hear folks say, well, I can't imagine, when you hear Dow Constantine say, well, we're going to depopulate the juvenile jail, or we're going to close down the downtown jail. And then somebody will say, well, what are we going to do without a jail? Where are we going to send people? Right. And I'm not saying judges are saying that, but sometimes you hear people in the community say that. And it gets back to something that I think is sometimes called the philosopher's dilemma, which is you should never mistake your inability to imagine something as an insight into reality, right? Just because you can't imagine it doesn't mean that it's not possible. And I can imagine it, and that's what gives me hope.
Thanks, Judge. Craig, it's on you.
I think, like I said, I'm doing a lot of stuff right now, Sean. So I'm going to school, get my teacher's certificate. And Seattle Public Schools started a program that is geared towards, first off, it was geared towards African-American men to be teachers, so that African-American boys see themselves at the front of the classroom. African-American girls see a man in front of the classroom. And then it morphed into people of color, no doubt. And my cohort is great. And I talked to a couple of lawyers and a couple of judges a couple of days ago. And Judge, if you can do anything to help push this, I would appreciate it. I was wondering, I asked them, does the Bar Association, Washington Bar Association, can they put something together like that for young people in college that want to be lawyers? Show them, the ropes, maybe even help financially, because that's a big financial bond on your back, a big backpack on your back to be a lawyer. But if we, as we're doing in the school district, try to put more teachers of color in the classroom, how about we focus on putting more lawyers of color in the law room and in the courtrooms, getting them through law school, helping them through law school. Seattle Public Schools is taking care of my prerequisites and moving me on to go on and finish my certificate. So if we did something like that, I think those kind of programs, your programs that gear towards the kids to make sure that they made a mistake and you're not pushing them away. You're bringing them to you to let them know that there are people that care for you, people that will watch out for you, teach you the right way to do things. I think that's what gives me hope. Going to school, trying to do what I can do to do my part, and I know other people are doing. Darrell, I want to say something to you, man. I probably got sons your age, and you are an inspiration. You really are. Keep doing what you do. I'm proud of you. We know each other from afar, probably, even if that. But other than that, you are exactly what we're talking about. Whether it be that you started from one way to get this way, or you started that way and kept going, you're what we're talking about. You're one of the leaders that are going to make this world a better place, no doubt.
Craig, every time people gas him up, he comes back to me asking for more money, man. I need y'all to, I'm playing, man. No, Darrell, you know you deserve every bit of those accolades. Darrell, close this out, man. What gives you hope in this time?
You know, I think the two things that come to mind, and I thought it was dope, you know, about, you know, the whole film and the people putting it on, you know, like they kept saying the word faith. And so that's really like the main thing that gives me hope. But then also, as I was watching the film, you realize the power that one person's compassion can have on other people's lives, and how that one man's compassion that he felt affected 11 other people in that room, and that affected another person. And I believe that's how we change the cultures, and we change our communities, is don't be afraid to act on your compassion. And when I exercise my own, right, and then I go and, you know, I'm in a youth prison or something, and I see the young people in there, and you recognize the genius and the leadership potential in those rooms, and I'm like, oh yeah, they got it. You know, somebody just need to draw up the right play and hand the ball off to them, and they're gonna take it all the way. And so the genius and the compassion of our young leaders that are coming right now, that gives me my hope. And I know that I'm supposed to exercise my own compassion to go out and awaken that, and let other people know it's okay to stand by yourself sometimes. If it's right and that's what you feel, then it don't matter who's against you. You know, you still got to stand on what's right, and act on your compassion. And I see people that are ready to keep that going and keep activating that in themselves and other people. And so that's why there's hope.
Yeah. Thank you, Darrell. Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Dave. I appreciate the three of you. Stefana Sneed, our Director of Development, thank you so much for putting together this webinar. Miki Kaneshiro, thanks for all the work you did on the back end, getting the communication out to everybody. And a big shout out to Axe on Stage for this production. Y'all heard the request throughout the video. You better, whatever that number was to text to that number, and or log, you know, find them on Facebook and make a contribution to the cause, because it's a shared lift, and we know that we're better together. And lastly, man, thanks to the 62 of y'all that are around right now and the 74 that started with us. Like, thank you for hanging out an extra hour to listen to some of these thoughts get shared, and for being on this journey towards justice with each of us. Those that know me and know me well know that my morning starts at 4 o'clock almost every single day. It's 6:34 now, which means I'm an hour and a half away from bedtime. So I'm gonna do what we should do, which is, y'all don't gotta go to sleep, y'all don't gotta go home, but you gotta log off out of here. Take care, everybody. Have a great night, and enjoy your
gentlemen.
Sunday.
Thank you, Judge. Thank you, Darrell. Thank you. Thank you, Sean.
Appreciate y'all. Thank you.
Thank all y'all. I'm trying to get in the film, Craig.
Come on. We got you. First time. I'm ready for you, though. You ready? All right. Well, y'all be good.
All right. Take care now.
All right, buddy.